Hello, and welcome back to Weird on the Rocks. This is a podcast that explores the weird, unusual, strange, and unexplained, all while getting our drink on. I'm your host, Katie. Today, I'm going to be discussing the Golden State Killer. I actually just recently read the book, I'll Be Gone in the Dark, by Michelle McNamara, which is all about this case, and I wanted to cover it while the information was still fresh in my mind. If you have not read this book, you need to. It is so well written, and Michelle really dedicated basically her whole career as a true crime author to this case. And there's so much information in there, and she was just an amazing writer. So go check that book out if you have not. If you're into true crime like me, you've probably heard about this case, but if you haven't, this might be completely new information. I'm hoping that even if you do know this case well, that you'll still learn something today from the information I'm going to share. Now, I don't want to give too much away in my introduction because this case is definitely a roller coaster and there's a lot to unpack. And I want the research to speak for itself and guide you along. I do, however, want to add a quick trigger warning because today's episode is going to be very heavy. There are some really intense details I'm going to be sharing, and I will also be discussing rape. So please don't listen if that is something that is going to be upsetting for you. As always, you can find me on Instagram and Facebook at Weird on the Rocks Podcast and my website weirdontheRocks.weebly.com. Please subscribe wherever you're listening now and rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts. That always makes my day. I appreciate it a lot. Before we get into it today, I want to share this week's beverage of choice. Today, I am drinking just some random stuff in my fridge, which kind of seems like a pattern for me. I have Bacardi rum mixed with lemonade and some pineapple juice. It's really good. It'd be really delicious with some mint or cucumber or some berries in it too. All right, well, let's get into it. Cheers, and let's get weird. In March of 1974, someone began breaking into homes in Visalia, California, a town in the San Joaquin Valley, 40 miles south of Fresno. The intruder would break into homes, rifle through the owner's possessions, and often take things of little to no value. The first reported burglary was that of $50 worth of coins from a piggy bank. The intruder would often leave things of value, including large sums of cash and banknotes, but would instead take things of sentimental value to the owner. He would also commonly go through women's underwear drawers and scatter their undergarments around the home. He would rearrange things and move items subtly, such as moving a framed photo to another part of the home. He liked to take tokens from his break-ins that were of no value, but most likely would remind him of his experience, such as stealing one earring from a pair and leaving the other, stealing stamps, rings, and cufflinks. Over the course of 20 months, the man who was now called the Visalia Ransacker broke into 120 homes, often hitting multiple homes in one day, with the record being 12 homes within a 24-hour period. Over this time, many people were able to get glimpses of the man, usually catching him scaling fences or walking through backyards in the night. He often tried to pry open multiple points of entry until one worked. He took screens off of windows and fled the home, leaving the front, back, and garage doors all open. He also liked to use warning items such as leaving a bottle in front of a door so he could hear if someone was coming, or hanging things off of door handles. The people of Visalia, California, a usually quiet and tame town, were on edge. After breaking into homes for nearly a year and a half, things took an even darker turn. On September 11th, 1975, the ransacker broke into the home of Claude Snelling, a journalism professor at the College of the Sequoias. He was awoken around 2 a.m. and was more startled than an average person may be due to the fact that just 6 months prior, he had chased a man out of his backyard who was standing under his daughter's window. Snelling left his room and shouted and ran through the open back door and confronted a man wearing a ski mask in his carport, attempting to kidnap his daughter. Claude Snelling was shot twice, staggered back into his bedroom with his wife, and died. the intruder escaped. The Visalia police dedicated more people to the ransacker task force and issued a $4,000 reward for his capture. Neighborhood watch groups were created, with neighbors taking turns being on patrol during the night. People bought dogs, and those who usually had their doors unlocked were now locking their doors at all times. 3 months later, in December of 1975, the Visalia ransacker, again wearing a ski mask, jumped the fence and entered the backyard of a home in a neighborhood he liked to frequent. Detective William McGowan was inside the garage on a stakeout and tried to detain the intruder. The ransacker pulled out a revolver and fired it near Detective McGowan's head, shattering his flashlight, and he was able to escape back over the fence. The ransacker left behind some stamps and a sock full of coins that fell out of his pocket, as well as tennis shoe tracks. Police were finally able to put together a criminal profile of the ransacker. He was described as young, Caucasian, male, around 5 feet 10 inches, and 180 to 200 pounds. He was physically fit and able to run, bicycle, and scale garden fences with relative ease. He also appeared to be left-handed and skilled with using weapons. He also seemed obsessed with personal trinkets over items of higher monetary value. After the shooting involving Detective McGowan, the break-ins stopped as abruptly as they had begun. In June of 1976, areas around Sacramento, California, about 200 miles away from Visalia, were on high alert after a man began breaking into homes and raping women. The women being attacked often lived alone in single-story homes and usually near creeks or trails. The victims almost always had the same story. A man wearing a ski mask would appear in their bedrooms in the middle of the night, would rape them, and leave. Several women recalled the man talking to himself, including a woman who heard the attacker saying, "I hate you, Bonnie," repeatedly, and one even said the man had cried. He also liked to threaten his victims, often wielding a knife and saying, "If you scream, I'll kill you." One woman recalled the man telling her, "You'll be silent forever, and I'll be gone in the dark." Many of the women said they had been experiencing odd things in the weeks leading up to their attack, as well as the weeks following. Many of the women recalled seeing a man in their yards or silently standing across the street in the night. Several of the women had break-ins, but nothing of value was taken. A few women even received phone calls prior to and after their attacks, with a man on the other end breathing heavily and threatening them. One woman received a phone call on Christmas Day with a man saying, "Merry Christmas," which she believed to be her attacker. Another woman received a phone call with a man on the other end who said, "Gonna kill you, bitch, bitch, bitch." Many of these occurrences went unreported by these women because they didn't want to make a fuss of something that wasn't a big deal or draw attention to themselves. Law officials believed that the attacker's behavior before his attacks was for reconnaissance purposes, to study the women and learn their patterns and routines. They believed that prior to the attacks, the man would often go to these women's homes and prowl outside their windows looking in at them during the night. However, the police believe the phone calls after the attacks were simply because the man got pleasure from prolonging the fear in the women and enjoyed knowing that they were uneasy and afraid of him. The police gave the man the name the East Area Rapist due to the places that he was attacking, such as Carmichael, Citrus Heights, and Rancho Cordova, California. The man now known as the East Area Rapist also started to call the Sacramento Sheriff's Office with taunting and threatening messages. On March 18, 1977, the Sheriff's Office received 3 phone calls from the man claiming to be the East Area Rapist. 2 of the calls were the man laughing and hanging up, but in the 3rd call he said, "I'm the East Area Rapist, and I have my next victim already stalked, and you guys can't catch me." Later that night, there was an attack by the East Area Rapist. On December 2nd, the sheriff's office received another phone call from the same man saying, "You're never gonna catch me, East Area Rapist, you dumb fuckers. I'm gonna fuck again tonight. Careful." The call was recorded and later released. Similar to the previous call, the East Area Rapist attacked later that night. 8 days later, on December 10th, 1975, at 10 p.m., Sacramento authorities received 2 identical calls saying, "I'm going to hit tonight, Watt Avenue." Both were recorded. Law enforcement patrols were increased that night, and at 2:30 a.m., a masked man eluded officers after being seen bicycling on Watt Avenue. When spotted later that night at 4:30 a.m., he discarded the bicycle and fled on foot. The bicycle had been stolen. Eventually, the East Area rapist outgrew attacking single women and progressed to attacking couples in their homes. His MO was to break in through a window or sliding glass door and awaken the sleeping couple with a flashlight, threatening them with a handgun. Victims were then bound with ligatures, often shoelaces, which he found or brought with him. They were blindfolded and gagged with towels which he had ripped into strips. The female victim was usually forced to tie up her partner before she herself was bound. The bindings were often so tight that the victim's hands were numb for hours after being untied. The man liked to separate the couple, often stacking dishes on the man's back and threatening to kill everyone in the house if he heard them rattle. He would move the woman to the living room and often raped her repeatedly, sometimes for several hours, while her husband was tied up in the next room. The offender sometimes spent hours in the home ransacking closets and drawers, eating food in the kitchen, drinking beer, and repeatedly raping the female again and again or making additional threats. On one occasion, the man stood in the kitchen naked and ate an entire sleeve of Ritz crackers, and another time he ate cold chicken straight from the fridge. Oftentimes, he would pretend to leave, and when the victims finally relaxed enough to get up and retrieve the phone, he would jump out of the darkness again. He also liked to take items of little value, including family photos and jewelry. The offender was believed to escape on foot through backyards and then use a bicycle or a car to get home. He used parks, creek beds, and dark trails to keep him off the street. In December of 1977, the same month the phone calls began, the man claiming to be the East Area rapist sent a poem to the Sacramento Bee, the Sacramento Mayor's office, and the TV station KVIE. The poem was titled "Excitement's Crave," and it read, "All those mortals surviving birth, upon facing maturity, take inventory of their worth to prevailing society. Choosing values becomes a task. Oneself must seek satisfaction. The selected route will unmask character when plans take action. Accepting some work to perform at fixed pay but promise for more is a recognized social norm, as is decorum, seeking lore. Achieving while others lifting should be cause for deserving fame. Leisure tempts excitement seeking. What's right and expected seems tame. Jesse James has been seen by all, and Son of Sam has an author. Others now feel temptation's call. Sacramento should make an offer to make a movie of my life that will pay for my planned exile. Just now I'd like to add the wife of a mafia lord to my file. Signed, your East Area rapist and deserving pest. See you in the press or on TV." 2 months later, on February 2nd, 1978, a young Sacramento couple, Brian Majorie, a military policeman at Mather Air Force Base, and his wife Katie, were walking their dog in the Rancho Cordova area. The couple got into a confrontation on the street with a man and tried to flee the scene, but were chased down and shot dead. Investigators believed they were killed by the East Area rapist due to how close they were to where he liked to attack, and a shoelace that was found at the scene. Police believe the couple may have caught the man prowling or breaking into a home and confronted him. After this, the attacks in Sacramento ended. Almost a year later, and 400 miles away from Sacramento, reports began coming in of a man breaking in and raping women while tying up their male partners in Santa Barbara. The assailant was given the name the Night Stalker. On December 30th, 1979, 44-year-old Robert Offerman and 35-year-old Deborah Manning were found shot dead at Offerman's condo in Goleta, California. Robert Offerman's bindings were untied, indicating that he tried to fight the attacker. Neighbors had heard gunshots, and paw prints of a large dog who didn't belong to the couple were found at the scene. The killer also broke into the vacant adjoining residence and stole a bike, which was later found abandoned. On March 13th, 33-year-old Charlene Smith and 43-year-old Lyman Smith were found murdered in their Ventura home. Charlene Smith had been raped. A log from the woodpile on the side of the house was used to beat the victims to death. Their wrists and ankles had been bound with a cord from the drapes, and an unusual Chinese knot, a diamond knot, was used on Charlene's wrists, the same knot that was found in an East Area Rapist case in Sacramento. The Night Stalker continued to break in, rape women, and kill the couples. On July 27, 1981, 35-year-old Sherry Domingo and 27-year-old Gregory Sanchez were the Night Stalker's 10th and 11th murder victims. Both of them were attacked in Sherry Domingo's residence in Goleta, just several blocks south of Robert Offerman's condo, the man who had been killed just 6 months earlier. The Night Stalker entered the house through a small bathroom window. Gregory Sanchez had not been tied up and was shot and wounded in the cheek before he was beat to death with a garden tool. Some believe that Gregory Sanchez may have realized he was dealing with the Night Stalker and tried to tackle the killer rather than be tied up. Again, neighbors heard gunshots. Sherry Domingo was raped and bludgeoned. Bruises on her wrists and ankles indicated that she had been tied, although the restraints were never found. After this murder, the Night Stalker lay dormant for 5 years. Then, on May 4th, 1986, 18-year-old Janelle Lisa Cruz was found after she was raped and bludgeoned to death in her Irvine home. Her family was on vacation in Mexico at the time. A pipe wrench, reported missing by Cruz's stepfather, was thought to be the murder weapon. This would be the Night Stalker's last known attack. Together, the Visalia ransacker, the East Area rapist, and the Night Stalker, who attacked hundreds of miles apart, were responsible for 13 murders, over 50 rapes, and over 100 burglaries. The entire state of California was terrified and on edge. Although the police in Southern California and the police in Central California were all dealing with men who shared a similar MO, they kept their information and investigations private. In Southern California, law officials continued their search for the man they called the Night Stalker, while simultaneously the Central California authorities were working on their cases for the Visalia ransacker and the East Area rapist. Separately, each jurisdiction created their own profile of their killer and rapist. He was a white male, about 5'10", had a slender and athletic build, size 9 to 9.5 shoe, had type A blood, and was a non-secretor, meaning his sperm does not contain blood group antigens, something that about 20% of the population has. He was also described by all of his female victims as having an extremely small penis. Authorities were also able to separately build psychological profiles on the man they were looking for. Some of his characteristics included that he hated women for actual or perceived wrongs. If he was married, he would probably have a submissive spouse who tolerated his sexually deviant behavior. He was most likely very intelligent and articulate. He probably began as a voyeur in his late teens or early 20s. He was neat and well organized in his personal life, and probably drove a well-maintained car. He liked to peep in the windows of people, and he was not interested in attacking children. The man is probably self-assured and confident, and would continue committing violent crimes until incapacitated by prison, death, or some other intervention. He would probably be described by those who knew him as arrogant, domineering, manipulative, and a chronic liar. For years, the Visalia ransacker, the East Area rapist, and the Night Stalker lived freely, never being brought to justice for their crimes and leaving their victims scared that he might strike again. Behind the scenes, law officials throughout California were trying to find the people responsible for these terrifying crimes, but they weren't making any progress. Numerous suspects were questioned and subjected to blood samples, but nobody ever fit the profile. It wasn't until 2001, 15 years after the last Night Stalker attack, when police finally began sharing information across different counties, that they began to find some answers. Back before the use of the internet, police kept their information very close to the vest and didn't consult with departments outside of their own very much. But eventually, detectives began talking, sharing information and evidence, and realized that they were all trying to catch the same man. The Visalia ransacker, the East Area rapist, and the Night Stalker were indeed all the same person. And because law officials weren't sharing information and working together, this man was able to escape from all of them for years. Thanks to Michelle McNamara, a true crime author who dedicated her life's work to finding this man, he was given a new name, the Golden State Killer. In June of 2016, the FBI released further information related to the crimes, including new composite sketches and crime details. A $50,000 reward was also announced. The hunt for the man who had been evading police and torturing the public for almost 40 years was ramping back up. Detective Paul Holes uploaded the killer's DNA profile from a Ventura County rape kit from the 70s to the personal genomics website GEDmatch. The website identified 10 to 20 distant relatives of the Golden State Killer, sharing the same great-great-great-grandparents. And from there, investigators were able to construct a family tree. From this family tree, they identified 2 suspects in the case who were white males who would be around the same age as the Golden State Killer. One was ruled out by a relative's DNA test, which left them with one suspect, a 73-year-old man named Joseph DeAngelo, who lived in Sacramento. Knowing that this man would be the right age, they obtained DNA samples from him by stealing a tissue from his garbage can. DeAngelo's DNA was compared to samples collected at Golden State Killer crime scenes, and it was a match. On April 24, 2018, the Sacramento Sheriff's Office arrested Joseph DeAngelo while he was alone in his home. DeAngelo cannot be charged with rapes or burglaries because the statute of limitations expired for those offenses, but he has been charged with 13 counts of murder and 13 counts of kidnapping. He faces either life without parole or death if convicted. Joseph DeAngelo was born in New York in 1945. Around the age of 10, his family moved to the Rancho Cordova area of California. He joined the Navy in 1964 and served 22 months during the Vietnam War. In May 1970, DeAngelo became engaged to Bonnie Jean Colwell, a classmate at Sierra College, but she reportedly broke off the relationship. Investigators believe this might be connected to the woman who heard the East Area rapist say, "I hate you, Bonnie," during one of the attacks. In 1971, he attended Sacramento State University, where he earned a bachelor's degree in criminal justice. He later took postgraduate courses and police training at the College of the Sequoias in Visalia. He then completed a 32-week police internship at the Roseville Police Department. From May 1973 to August 1976, he actually worked as a burglary unit police officer in the small town of Exeter, California, near Visalia. By 1976, DeAngelo had been promoted to sergeant and was in charge of the Exeter Police Department's Joint Attack on Burglary program. He then worked in Auburn from August 1976 to July 1979, when he was arrested for shoplifting a hammer and dog repellent. He was sentenced to 6 months probation and fired, but was never questioned as to why he was buying those items. In 1973, he married Sharon Huddle and had 3 daughters together before divorcing in 1991. Over the years, he did various jobs, including being a truck mechanic, until he retired in 2017. His brother-in-law said that DeAngelo casually brought up the East Area rapist in conversation around the time of the crimes. Neighbors reported that DeAngelo frequently engaged in loud, profane outbursts. One neighbor reported that his family received a phone call from DeAngelo threatening to deliver a load of death because of their barking dog. Joseph DeAngelo was living with a daughter and granddaughter at the time of his arrest. He is currently 74 years old and is in jail awaiting his trial. In April of this year, prosecutors said they will seek the death penalty. Sadly, true crime author Michelle McNamara, who wrote the book I'll Be Gone in the Dark about the Golden State Killer and gave him the name, died before Joseph DeAngelo was arrested. Her book really shed light on his crimes and drew attention to the case that had pretty much been forgotten. At the end of her book was an excerpt titled "Letter to an Old Man" that gives me goosebumps every time I read it because it is so eerily similar to how he was actually caught. It says, quote, "One day soon, you'll hear a car pull up to your curb, an engine cut out. You'll hear footsteps coming up your front walk, like they did for Edward Wayne Edwards, 29 years after he killed Timothy Hack and Kelly Drew in Sullivan, Wisconsin, like they did for Kenneth Lee Hicks, 30 years after he killed Lori Billingsley in Aloha, Oregon. The doorbell rings. No side gates are left open. You're long past leaping over a fence. Take one of your hyper-gulping breaths. Clench your teeth. Inch timidly toward the insistent bell. This is how it ends for you. You'll be silent forever, and I'll be gone in the dark. You threatened a victim once. Open the door. Show us your face. Walk into the light." End quote. So obviously, this case is extremely sad and heavy, and it's hard to comprehend. This man is an absolute monster who ruined the lives of so many people. There were the innocent people he killed, as well as the 50 women he raped and left them with a lifetime of trauma and fear. It's appalling to me that this case isn't more well known. We hear about the Zodiac, Ted Bundy, Jeffrey Dahmer, but I had never really heard about the Golden State Killer, and definitely not the Visalia Ransacker, the East Area Rapist, or the Night Stalker. This case always makes me feel a lot of different emotions. I'm pissed off that Joseph DeAngelo was able to live most of his life as a free man. He was able to have a family and hold down jobs. It makes me sick to my stomach knowing that he was able to somewhat enjoy his life and be normal. But I'm also happy because he was caught, even if it was 40 years later. At least it happened, which is more to say for a lot of cold cases. There are so many that never get solved, and it leaves the public and mostly their victims without any sense of closure. I can't imagine being attacked by a man who was never caught. These people probably have lived their entire lives in fear, looking over their shoulder, locking their doors. It just isn't fair. I hope that the people whose lives were affected by him are able to close the door on this chapter in some way and know that justice is served sometimes. And I think this case also gives hope to solving more cold cases like this. The use of genealogy sites and DNA technology is only getting more and more advanced. And if we can use these things to our advantage to find murderers like Joseph DeAngelo, I say, let's do it. I am hoping that Joseph DeAngelo doesn't die before his trial begins, because I really want that son of a bitch to have to relive every awful thing he did in a courtroom. But I want to know how you guys feel about this case. I know it's a very heavy one, and I hope I was able to condense it in a comprehensible way for you guys that was easy to follow, because there's a lot of information. Had you heard about the Golden State Killer before this episode? Did you hear about him being caught last year? I'm curious because this is a case that really wasn't on the radar for a lot of people until this book came out and podcasts such as My Favorite Murder started talking about it. Like I mentioned, the book I'll Be Gone in the Dark by Michelle McNamara is amazing. If you haven't read that, you need to. I got it on Amazon for pretty cheap, and it is so well written, and it goes into so much more detail than I could even touch the surface on today. Please let me know your thoughts and opinions on this case. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook at Weird on the Rocks Podcast, and my website weirdontheRocks.weebly.com. Thank you so much for joining me today. And until next time, cheers and stay weird.
That was a Titancast episode.